It is the half dozen edition of the podcast because it's episode 6, and that's a really bad joke to start off, so I'm sorry about that. Hello, Jared Walsh here. I am your host of the Role Models podcast. I appreciate you coming back. If you've had a listen to a couple of my previous episodes, if it's your first time, stick with me. I'll take about 20 minutes of your time, whether you are sitting on public transport, you're at home. I listen to podcasts while I'm cooking dinner. I should be talking to my wife and child and my dog, but I'm just really obsessed with podcasts at the moment. The reason I'm doing this is I think we have so much negativity in the world, and I want to talk to positive people doing positive things. The thing is, my guests, they are all elite in their chosen industry. They're athletes, they're media performers, they are businessmen and women, and they are doing some amazing things away from the spotlight. In episode 5, I had a chat to 3-time Perth Wildcats champion Greg Hire. Now, we spoke about not just his personal career and his journey as a basketballer, but the Perth Wildcats legacy and the culture they have created at this successful basketball club.
But when you've got your core group of guys that really strongly believe in the values and uphold them to the utmost of their abilities, that's powerful. Any guy coming in, they've got to buy in quite quickly.
What you may not know about Greg Hire is that he and his beautiful wife Ainsley have an organisation called A Stitch in Time. It's all about mental health and promoting awareness and education in not just kids, teenagers, but also professional athletes and some of the struggles that they may go through on a day-to-day basis.
You know, there's nothing wrong with a guy being honest and saying, look, I've got a problem, and I think one of the more courageous things is as a guy or your best mate saying, let's go have a coffee or a beer and just discuss it, you know, and let's have a bit of a chin wag, and I think that's more powerful than anything else, really.
Oh, and the other thing you may not know about Greg Hire is that he's the reason I started this Role Models podcast. You will find out all that information and heaps more. A really important chat we had as well. I definitely recommend you have a listen. That's episode 5. Let's get into episode 6, the half dozen. I said the bad joke again, sorry. I have a feeling you'll be quite familiar with my special guest for episode 6 of Role Models, if of course you are indeed familiar with the sport of AFL, because this man's pretty much done it all. He's a Premiership player, 2-time All-Australian, 4-time John Cahill medalist, which is the Port Adelaide Football Club's Best and Fairest award. He's won the Best Player afield in the Anzac round, the Peter Badco VC medal, and he is the games record holder for the Port Adelaide Football Club in the AFL. He's played 300 games. It's not too bad, hey? Yep, I'm talking about Kane Cornes. Now, there's a few things you may think about Kane Cornes. He comes from a famous name, which I'm sure when the name Cornes comes up, everybody has their different opinions. He's everywhere in the media at the moment, and he was an incredibly determined and talented footballer. And I'm lucky enough to know Kane, and I'll be honest with you, I think he's really misunderstood. So I took this opportunity to have a chat to Kane about his football career, how he approached his football, how he now approaches critiquing his former teammates and coaches in the media, and what happened with that whole fire brigade thing when he decided to become a firefighter and then left a little while later. What you may not know about Kane Cornes, though, is he's had a pretty tough couple of years. He and his beautiful wife Lucy are amazing parents to 3 young boys, and their oldest one, Eddy, he's had a lot of health problems, and what you're going to hear over the next 20 minutes is a really open and honest Kane Cornes talk about how they felt when they first got this news. Their first child coming into the world was going to experience some health issues. How Eddy's going now, how he's restricted in some areas in regards to playing kids' sport. And the other thing that really stood out was Kane's attitude before, when it came to football and life, and after he found out that Eddy was unwell. And as you know, this podcast is all about positivity and people doing positive things in the community. So how is Kane involved? Is he involved in charities? Or, you know, some of the experiences he has had going into hospital visits with Eddy and meeting some of the other kids to give him a real perspective on life. I really recommend you have a listen. Kane, as I said, I think sometimes is misunderstood. Hopefully you'll get to know him a little bit more. Role Models, episode 6. My guest, Kane Cornes. This is going to be one of the easiest podcasts I've done because I'm really lucky to know you, Kane Cornes, really well on a personal level. So thanks for giving me time because you're the busiest man in the world. I thought I was really busy, but you're really busy.
Not true at all. But no, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
We are talking positive people doing positive things. And you, since you have retired from football, have moved into the media, and you had a highly publicised retirement from football, which I'll get to in a second. But I think it's really important to use this podcast to talk about some of the things people may not know about you if they haven't read the book that David Pemberthy helped write.
Yep.
And, of course, your interview. So just quickly reflecting on your career, because we are approaching an AFL season now, or if you're listening in the AFL season, what are some of the proudest moments that you have looking back at your 300-plus games for the Power?
Yeah, I think it's a good metaphor for life, I guess, an AFL career. There's a few highs, not a lot. Now, you've obviously got the premierships in 2004, your first game, milestones and things like this, but there's also a lot of lows. So across the course of a 15-year career, you do have your highs and lows, which is basically a reflection of your life. So look, I used it as a great springboard for the rest of my life and post-retirement. But look, there are some challenges there, being told you're going to be traded and being told you're going to be sacked and things like that really dent your confidence. But in the scheme of things, if you can just take yourself inside the moment when you think your whole world is crumbling around you, fast forward 5 years and no one really cares about it anymore. So you get so caught up in your career and day-to-day life and thinking that everyone's watching you and every mistake you make on the field, people are bagging you and things like that, when at the end of the day they might reflect on it for 10 or 15 seconds and then they move on. So, I had a lot of highs, a lot of ups and downs, and some great people along the way.
There's a few Kane Cornes moments which stand out for me, and I wanted to ask you about them in regards to how you handled criticism as a footballer. So a couple of them. The first one was there was a game at Football Park when I think Port Adelaide defeated Collingwood in the final seconds of the game.
Done your research.
And I watched this. I remembered you giving the bird to Alan Didak, I think it was. It was either Alan Didak or Brodie Holland.
Brodie Holland.
Yeah, okay. And that showed your passion on the field. And there was a fair bit of criticism and controversy about that, but there was also a moment, and I've got this weird knack. I don't know if it's like Rain Man or something. I remember where I was when I hear certain things, and I was driving on Fletcher Road in Peterhead ages ago, and it was a Sunday morning, and Chris McDermott was on 5AA, the radio station, copying a fair bit of criticism because he'd written an article saying that you weren't in Port Adelaide's best 22.
Well, let's talk about the first one, because the Brodie Holland one, I was 19, we played a game at Footy Park. For some reason, we wore this teal Guernsey, Port Adelaide. It was a sponsorship thing. That's a memory that I've got. It was a Friday night, and Brodie Holland had been giving it to me about my old man and all sorts of things, just as you do, just normal, nothing malicious or anything like that. But for some reason, we won. I got caught up in it and gave him the finger after the game and ran off. And then the next day, I thought, geez, that was pretty bad. Like they're talking about it on the footy shows and getting criticised, and it was one of the more embarrassing moments of my career. Mark Williams actually made me get up in front of the group on the Monday and apologise to my teammates for carrying on like an idiot. So that was that. I was embarrassed. But then later in that week, we have a pigeonhole at the club, and I checked my pigeonhole. It was a letter, handwritten letter to me, and I opened it up. It was actually a death threat from a Collingwood supporter saying they're going to get me, and it was serious. Like I reported it to the club, they reported it to the police, and not much came out of it. But I was actually really scared. You know how passionate these Collingwood fans can be. So I was scared, and then I was living with Chris Hall at the time in a little place in Glenelg, and one night me and Hawley were home, and I hear this tap, tap, tap at the door. I went and got the door, and it was these three guys in a mask, like, you know, Pulp Fiction, where the guy has that, three of those masks. One had a balaclava on, had a knife, and tapping on the window with a knife. And I've just lost it, and I've just run back in the house. I said, Hawley, you're not going to believe this is the guys. So Hawley's gone to the front door. Anyway, it was Josh Carr, Michael Stevens, and Brent Guerra playing a practical joke on me. So well done to them. They absolutely got me. But that was the funny thing out of that story. The other one, the McDermott one, he wrote an article. It was a pre-season of, might have been 2009, and he said, my place in the Port Adelaide side, I didn't deserve it, and probably going to play in the SANFL. That was fine. I really took that one personally because I'd known Bone for a long time, grew up idolising him at the Glenelg Footy Club, and for him to write that article before we'd even played a game in round one, it was pre-season, front page of the Sunday Mail, and just got everyone speculating and talking about my place in the side, which I was disappointed with because he didn't ring me before. And then in round one, I actually had, a couple of weeks after he'd wrote that article, I had one of my best games ever against North Melbourne. We won, and Chad absolutely gave it to Chris McDermott. On the post-game, I was interviewed after the game, as they do, the broadcaster, and Chad came along and said, "What'd you think of that, Chris McDermott?" Like, in the background. So that's. But anyway, so I didn't speak to Bone for. I really took it personally, and not so much anymore. Now being in the media, you flip it and you think, well, geez, I was a bit precious over that, and Bone and I have since made up and had it out. But as a player, you're far too precious and far too reactive to any negative feedback, and that's one thing I've learnt transitioning into this role.
Do you find that you are somewhat lucky that you are not Chad? And the reason why I ask is because myself growing up, and my father's a sports broadcaster, and everybody, whenever I mention the media, we're going, oh, okay, you're just going to do what your dad's doing and stuff. And I reckon that Chad probably would have copped that a fair bit more than you did. But I wanted to ask, at what stage did you, if you're similar to me, stop fighting that I just don't want to be known as Kane Cornes' son, I want to make my own identity, and then start embracing it?
Oh, early. I was always, I hated when I was a junior and got picked for state teams or whatever, and people said, oh, you're just getting a game because you're old man. That was the one thing I really hated. But look, I never felt it too bad. I always sort of felt like I was making my own way. And the good thing was Chad was so much taller than me, different player, so we weren't compared to much because we weren't the same. It's not as if we're like twin brothers, like the Selwoods, and Joel's the better one. And I didn't get that much because we're so different. And look, I just loved playing with him. I loved playing with my brother. I loved everything about that. So I never competed against him. It was not an issue for me. And I never really competed against Dad either. But I really loved my childhood because I was around footy clubs, I was around my heroes, and it was a great upbringing.
Two more questions about footy. I wanted to ask about your retirement, because it really came out of the blue that you were going to retire and then become a full-time fireman, which you're obviously not doing that anymore. Do you look back on that and wish you played out that whole season?
Yeah, I do. That was a real mistake, and to try and explain it to the listeners, I never really knew what I wanted to do after footy. Like, I'd always been interested in the media and did an apprenticeship, a traineeship when I was 18 at 5AA across the road there in the old building. And that was an interest to me, but I wasn't sure there's that many opportunities in the media. So I thought, well, what else am I going to do? And the Fire Brigade was great because it was flexible and you could probably combine the two. And they just had the intake pop up, and I knew it was going to be my last year of footy, 2015. I'd spoken to Ken about it. We're pretty much all on the same page that basically no matter what happened, this was going to be it. And then this Fire Brigade applications opened. I just put my name in, heard it's hard to get into, didn't think too much of it, but kept progressing through the stages. Obviously, there's 4 or 5 stages that you have to go. And then I thought, geez, I'm going to have to make a decision here. And then in round 3, we lost to Sydney in round 2. Ken came to me in round 3 and said, look, I'm a bit worried about your performance. I'm going to rest you in round 3. And I was like, Kenny, what's only round 3? I don't really need a rest. So that was sort of the trigger in my mind that, well, this is definitely my last year and I don't have a great role to play at Port Adelaide. So if the Fire Brigade thing progresses, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to probably have to retire halfway through the season. And that's the way it eventuated. Look, I'd love to have the time back because the Fire Brigade wasn't for me. I didn't enjoy it at all. And now I'm doing what I'm passionate about. But I do feel in some way that I let down the Port Adelaide supporters and also some of my teammates. And they had through a pretty tough year in 2015. I feel like I probably abandoned them a little bit. It was a mistake, and yeah, I'd like to go back and change that one.
It seems like it happened so quickly as well, because that game against Richmond, they gave you the Guard of Honour, and I thought, that's just over then. Like, you didn't take time to walk around the field and thank everyone. You were running off the field because both teams were waiting for you. And I thought, it's not a moment where I reckon, traditionally a lot of retirement. So use the Nick Del Santo and Ferrito example from the Kangaroos last year when they walked off the Adelaide Oval and they had their time to really reflect, but it just went bang and you were gone.
Well, it did, didn't it? And because it was my 300th as well, it was a bit weird as well, and we lost. It was disappointing, so you don't want to sort of make it all about you. Look, the club was great. Got all my family over, some friends there, but yeah, it wasn't, my last game wasn't something I look back and go, oh, that was amazing. Running out with the kids was great and got a great picture of it, but it does leave a little bit of taste in my mouth, probably the way I handled it, and I was just probably didn't back myself in enough that there was going to be opportunities outside of footy, and back myself in enough, and I just sort of first jumped at the first opportunity that came my way. But I'd never had a job before. I left school and played at Port Adelaide, didn't know what I wanted to do, and if it was a mistake that I made, which it was, it's not a disaster.
Last footy question before we get into the second half of the Role Models podcast, which is really important that we talk about it. The first time you had to criticise Port Adelaide, the football club, Did you receive a phone call, or did you have to really get yourself into the mindset of going, I need to constructively pot someone that I've played with formerly, and it was a really difficult thing to do, or did you find it easy?
No, it's been the biggest challenge since joining the media. I remember exactly when it was. Last year, Port Adelaide got smashed by the Giants in Canberra. I think 86 points in one of the worst performances I've ever seen from a Port Adelaide side. And I was there, and we went back to the airport, and all the players were there in the Virgin Lounge. So I was chatting to them, and I went up to Kenny. I said, mate, I'll write an article on Mondays for the Advertiser, and I'm going to have to go pretty hard here. And he said, no, that's okay. That's fine. And I was sitting sort of behind him on the plane, and without him knowing, he was watching the game, and I was watching him code the game, which is where they make their comments about what they could have done better and what was good on the game. And I was sort of getting an insight into what he thought of the game by watching him code this game, and he was pretty brutal about it. So I thought, well, he'd be expecting this. So I did that. That was the first time. They were fine about that one. But there's been ones over the course of the year. They obviously had a disappointing year last year where they've been upset about it, and they have approached me, and it's been difficult. But look, I think the best thing to do, and Ken's pretty open and honest. He says, look, if you're going to have a crack, give me a call. We can chat about it. I can either change your mind or I agree with you and you go ahead and write it. So they've been pretty mature about the whole thing.
You have had a really interesting life as well, of course, with your upbringing. Your beautiful wife, Lucy, has an amazing business, and you got 3 gorgeous kids, mate. So I wanted to talk about Eddy in the second half of the podcast, because it's given me a really good opportunity to get to know people who live their life in the public eye. And you did have a lot of public interest in what was going on with Eddy. But for the people who don't know, can you take us back to the start?
Yeah, well, it was 2006 when we found out Lucy was pregnant with Eddy. So January 2006, all good, perfect. First baby, we'd just been married. Everything's really excited. First scan was great. I think about the 8-week mark. It's been a while since I've had kids, so perhaps I don't remember the timeline exactly right. But 8 weeks, fine, no worries. Heartbeat's good. Child's healthy, no worries. So you just move on, tell everyone you're excited, you can't wait. And then the 20-week scan, where the baby's a bit more developed, we went in, and once again, we all thought it was fine, in a great mood. And so the sonographer, if that's what it's called, or the lady that does the ultrasound, said, look, I'm just going to have to leave the room for a second. We didn't know any different because it was our first baby, and she was gone for ages. I'm thinking, well, what's going on here? But once again, didn't really think anything of it. And she came back in with the doctor, and the doctor had no idea what was going on, but basically drew us this little diagram of a chest, and with the heart on the right side of the body instead of the left, and said, look, your child's heart is in the wrong position. Look, I haven't seen it before. I don't know too much about it. We'll send you in to a specialist in the coming weeks, but I can't give you much information. So we left there just absolutely shattered. Didn't know if that was it, if the baby could survive. Never heard of it. Obviously go and do your own research, but didn't have enough details to get in depth about what exactly the situation was. Anyway, we ended up seeing a specialist, Gavin Wheaton, who Eddy still sees today. He's his cardiologist. And he said, look, it's called dextrocardia, where the heart's on the other side. But from what I can see on the scan, it looks fine. He looks perfectly healthy. Some people have that and they live a perfectly normal life. Looks to be the case with your baby. So we just went on and carried on with the normal pregnancy. It was a tricky birth, but no dramas. He was born. Doctor came in, yep, all good, but we'll just send you for a follow-up scan when he's 10 days old. So we did that, went and saw Gavin Wheaton again, and then we found out the seriousness of it. So he's got some drainage issues with his heart. One lung gets a lot more blood than what it should, so complications with that. They thought he was going to have open heart surgery straight away, but still haven't had that because he hasn't sort of needed to yet, but there's still that possibility that will happen. He's got some other complications with that as well, asthma and some things as well, and as I said, one of his lungs is a little bit smaller than the other one. So he's got some challenges in front of him, but he's a great kid and doing pretty well at the moment, which is great.
Does he know that he's been unwell?
Yeah, he does. Like the first 6 months of his life was horrific because of it was more probably the asthma that got us in hospital. Sort of, on average, probably in hospital for a week every month. So every 4 weeks we'd spend a week in hospital. It's just the way it turned out. He had 2 operations by the time he was 1, and now he knows that he's obviously got 6 monthly cardiology checkups. He's got 6 monthly respiratory issues as well, and there's another issue for Eddy, unfortunately, that we'll touch on in a minute. But he knows he's got issues, but he doesn't hold it back. The hardest thing for me this year is the first time he's not allowed to play footy, so I had to have that conversation with him in the summer this month, and that was really hard. He was quite upset, and I was upset. So he's not playing footy, but he's going to focus on his cricket. He loves that. So I don't know how he'll go this year, not playing footy and watching his brothers and being surrounded by it. That'll be a challenge for him. That's probably been the most difficult thing. And the reason he can't play footy is because he's only got one kidney as well. We found out that one of those first operations when he was 6 months old, it looks to be a surgical error by the person performing the operation. And as they're pulling, it was a catheter operation where they put a catheter up through your groin to take some images of the heart. Very low risk operation, happens all the time. But as the catheters come out, it's nicked one of his kidneys on the way out, and the kidneys shriveled up and bled and died. So he's only got one kidney. We only found that out 5 years later. So that's another thing, and that was probably the angriest I've ever been in my life about that. And how does this happen? You're just going for a routine operation, you find out your kid's lost a kidney. It's another appointment we have to go to, renal clinic we have to go to every 12 months. So that's why he's not playing footy. So there's been a lot of challenges, but it's been made you grow up quick.
The perception of you as a footballer, I think before you had to go through this with Eddy, is different to the perception of you as a person. Do you feel that your attitude to life, football and everything changed from that moment? And if you can take positives out of what's going on? I mean, I've spoken to the people on this podcast saying that everybody has issues that they go through, and you're well aware of that. And you see the smile on Eddy's face. I've heard him on the radio giving stats and just loving life and living the most happy and full-on life that he can. But for you personally, before this, do you think you are different to now?
Yeah, I was probably a really selfish footballer in the first maybe 5 to 6 years of my career. I was really driven, and that's the way I sort of flipped it in my head. Look, I want to win this. I want to get All-Australian. I want to win Best and Fairest. And it was a really selfish approach, and probably got some of my teammates offside. I remember 2005. I finished second to Treaders in the Best and Fairest by 3 votes, and I spat the dummy. I thought I was going to win it, expected to win it. And on the night of the Best and Fairest, made the worst speech when I finished second, and I'm really disappointed at myself in that.
What did you say?
Well, nothing really. I just got up and accepted the award, and I said, no, thanks to my family, Lucy, mum and dad, thank you, and then basically walked off.
So you were dirty with it?
Oh, and clearly and obviously to everyone in the room that was there, they would have known. And the reason I'm really disappointed, it's one of the big regrets in my career, is because it was Roger James and Josh Franco's last season, and it was their goodbye Best and Fairest, and I didn't even mention them or anything like that, and I stormed off and left, and everyone knew. And it was, you speak about trust issues around a footy club, it probably set me back 2 or 3 years at the footy club. I, voted out of the leadership group and things like that. So, and then Eddy came along a couple of years later, so it probably changed your perspective on that. And I reckon, especially when Ken Hinkley came in, I was a much better team player than what I ever had been before in my career. So, yeah, you grow up pretty quick and learn a lot of things in the way. Things you'd change, but as long as you admit it and you're open and honest about it and you learn from it, then I think it's not a disaster.
What about the relationship between you and Lucy? Because I see, I'm a dad now, and you never think you could physically harm someone until you have a kid, and you think someone says something bad about your kid. For example, what happened with Will Minson years ago, and I once again remember exactly where I was, and I think I read something that Lucy wrote on Facebook. But do things like this just bring you guys closer together as a couple, and you go, you're going to have testing times, you're going to have, really difficult times, but you guys are high school sweethearts, and you just seem stronger than ever, and it just brings you closer together to give Eddy the best life possible, but also the other 2 kids you've got as well, and the boys get around him as well. Yeah,
I was pretty lucky. Like, I met Lucy at school. She was in year 11, I was in year 10, so I was 15 and she was 16. Got myself an older woman.
No, you did, mate.
How about that?
No,
thanks.
Well done.
Impressive. And so she's been there like before footy and everything. Like, so it's been amazing. Really lucky, and then the kids and everything. Will Minson was pretty ordinary from him, to be honest. Like, Raf had been born, my second son, and I was late to Darwin where the game was. Flew up on the day of the game because Raf was born the day before. And Will Minson said, "What are you doing here when your son's sick and dying at home?" He thought I was late to the game because Eddy had been sick again, not because of the birth of my second son. So he got his information mixed up. But yeah, that was hard. But she responded on Twitter years later after he said a similar thing to Daniel Pearce about Pearce's mum. So anyway, so that was another interesting thing, and I guess she just felt Daniel Pearce was really upset about that as well, and she thought, once maybe, but twice is a bit much that you haven't learnt from it, and what a stupid thing to say. So she had a crack. I wouldn't recommend it, but no, she's great, and as you said, we've got a pretty strong relationship.
I wanted to ask you finally about the term role model, because it does get thrown around, and of course it's the name of this podcast, but a lot of people see you as a role model as a footballer. They have the number 18 on their back and they think, great, this is my opportunity to become the number 18. I'm not talking about Jimmy Toumpas from Port, I'm talking about you, of course, but also you, over the past 20 minutes, have been really open and honest, which is something I don't reckon you probably could have done 7-8 years ago. And you're really reflective now, and it's nice to be able to do that. And self-reflection, I think, is really important as human beings, to be able to go, hey, this is my role in society, and if someone comes up to me to ask questions. So do you still think now, as a former player, that the term role model applies to you, and it's really important to lead by example?
Yeah, I haven't thought about it a lot, but I guess you do it every day for your kids, don't you? Like, you wake up and you clearly think, what example do you want to set for your kids? So it's no different out there, and if someone sees me as a role model, then you look at it with a badge of honour. And look, I think if people are doing things that they're passionate about and being good to one another, then that is a great role model for me. And it doesn't take someone in a position to be on the radio or play footy to be a great role model. Some of my best role models aren't in positions like that. So look, it's a privilege to be in this position, and I've enjoyed the journey, and got a lot of things you still want to achieve in your life moving forward.
Now, Eddy is involved in a lot of areas when it comes to hospitals and things like that. So do you have any charities that you want to mention, or involvement that you have that you want to really bring awareness to?
Yeah, look, I love the Starlight Foundation. Eddy was granted a wish about a year ago, and he went and watched the Aussie boys play a T20 game at the Adelaide Oval against India, and that was great. So the Starlight Foundation, for what they do and bringing a smile on the kid's face, there's a Starlight room every time he goes to the Women's and Children's Hospital for a checkup. He goes and plays PlayStation, gets around Captain Starlight and things like that. So I've got a special place for them.
Thank you very much for being so open and honest, Kane Cornes. You're doing amazing things in the media now, and I just love this opportunity for people to see a different side to you, because I think that I think the Cornes family are misunderstood, and it's not by any fault of your own, but I just think that the media can really put off a perception or someone's actions on the football field. And I'm lucky enough to meet you and know Chad and also your dad, who people will have their opinions, but once you sit down and have a conversation with, you're actually really good people, and I think it's really good that you came on to really showcase a little bit of your life. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Walshy.
He's probably going to take my job one day. He's such a good media performer, Kane Cornes, and I'm really grateful that he gave me 20 minutes to have a chat about his life. And I told you, I reckon he's a bit misunderstood. Beforehand, if I would have said to you the Cornes name, then maybe you thought, oh, here we go. But have a listen. He knows what he's talking about, and obviously he's gone through a lot with Lucy and, of course, Eddy and their other two boys. And to see how they're handling it right now, it's pretty remarkable. Look, if you want to follow Kane on Twitter, he's at Kane Cornes, always talking footy and sport. There's a photo of him after the New York Marathon there with a disgusting handlebar moustache. You'll be able to see that for yourself. If you want to follow me, I would love that. At Jared Walsh on Twitter, Jared Walsh MC on Facebook, and at Walsh Jared on Instagram. Really appreciate you again taking the time to have a listen to this podcast. Give it a like, a thumbs up on iTunes. You can do a thumbs up on Stitcher as well, I think, and make sure you share this on all your social media accounts. Got a lot more special guests lined up over the next couple of episodes as well, including a man who was diagnosed with a brain tumour and then a few months later ran the New York Marathon. You don't want to miss that one. Thanks for listening.
This podcast is part of the Ozcast Network.